After a month of protests, Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam has said the controversial bill that would have allowed extradition to the Chinese mainland is dead, admitting that her government's attempt to pass the extradition bill has been a, quote, complete failure. The question now is, will it be enough? Joining us is Otago University international relations expert Robert Patman. Good morning.
Good morning, Ryan.
Is this going to be enough? Because she hasn't said, she said it's dead, but she hasn't withdrawn the bill completely.
Well, I don't think from the point of view of many protesters it will be enough. In effect, it basically confirms what was already clear, that the extradition bill had been suspended. And I think the protesters want the extradition bill completely removed and withdrawn, and that hasn't happened yet. So I think we're in a bit of a holding pattern here, and I think we can expect more tension and possibly more protests.
How much of this do you think is being led by Beijing? I mean, the language around it being dead, the concessions that Lam has made, how much of that comes down to, or is Beijing led?
Well, the chief executive, Carrie Lam, who has lost the confidence of many people in Hong Kong, it should be emphasised that she's not directly democratically elected. She's selected by the Legislative Council and approved by China. So China has to give the green light to her appointment. And she is seen by many protesters as being a bit of an extension of Beijing. And many of them actually think not only should she withdraw the extradition bill, but she should actually resign. And the reason, of course, the extradition bill is such a volatile issue in Hong Kong, it's got money implications and it's got people implications. The money implications is that if this measure became law, then China would have the means to interfere with what is a thriving financial centre. And also it's got people implications, because under the legislation, the extradition bill, China would be able not only to extradite criminals, but also people they might define as political activists or pro-democracy campaigners. And this is why it's caused so much unrest involving the protests of millions of people in Hong Kong.
I guess the big question, and this is where the last round of protests some years ago now, that were led by a young man named Joshua, those protests were significant because the parents of the young people got involved, and that started to have an impact on the leaders in Hong Kong. So I guess the question is what she has said in terms of this being dead, is that enough to put off the middle protesters and to just make this more of a fringe issue?
Well, I think it's a wait-and-see situation. I think Carrie Lam will be, supported by China, will be looking to see whether this diffuses the protest, that using the term dead is enough. And I think what is clear, they cannot proceed with this extradition legislation in the near future, but it doesn't mean it's dead and buried, that it can't be revived in the future. And so this is going to be a test of wills. I think the protesters may think they've now got momentum on their side, if you like, people power, because after all, that people power has effectively halted something that Carrie Lam and her Chinese backers wanted. And so that's been, in a sense, that has been a major defeat for Beijing and the Chinese government. And sensing that momentum's on their side, the protesters may step up their efforts. It should be emphasised, Ryan, that many of the protests involve a lot of young people in Hong Kong.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for your time this morning. That is Robert Patman, international relations expert. This is the AM show, and it's great to have you with us. It is now 1 away from 7.